God damn it, not another regular Tuesday in Paris. Hey folks, it's Indieguy. You know, the PSP had some great games that could at times rival ones from the PS2. But when it came to shooters, there aren't too many of them. Okay, there aren't many good ones. This is for obvious reasons, of course. The PSP only had one analog stick, but some games do come to mind. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, the Siphon Filter PSP games, and of course, the subject of this video, Resistance Retribution, a spin-off of Insomniac's trilogy Resistance. Now, the development of this game, though, was handed off to Bend Studios, that were the guys behind all the Siphon Filter games, and Days Gone. So take that as you will. Before we get into the game itself, we should take a look at the plot of not only this game, but also Resistance as a franchise. Now, the franchise takes place in an alt universe in where something crash landed in Russia, bringing with it a virus. This virus would gradually turn people into these beings called the Chimera, which in reality are an alien species and this series' bad guy. Some decades pass and almost nothing is known from Russia. But the world's governments know something is up. And something does happen in 1949 when the Chimera break through Europe, ravaging it in a matter of months. Resistance 1 takes place in 1951 when American forces arrive in Britain to try and save it. And not much more is relevant from that game other than the fact that the Chimera are repelled and Britain is liberated. Very unfortunate to everyone involved. Now, Retribution starts when Britain is still being liberated. Our protagonist, James Grayson, is on a mission to liberate a conversion facility when he finds his brother being turned into a Chimera. He then proceeds to go on a rampage, destroying every conversion facility in his wake, going against his orders. This ends up with him being court-martialed and arrested for treason, and after a couple of months of death row, an officer from the French resistance movement called the Maquis visits Grayson and enlists him to fight the Chimera in the continent. Rain Bouchard, the officer that rescued Grayson, ends up having ulterior motives to freeing our protagonist. Not to get into any spoilers, but that's pretty much it. To be completely honest, the story itself is pretty good. But man, these guys cannot write good dialogue, even if their life depended on it. There are puns and one-liners everywhere. And these aren't Duke Nukem or Blood levels of one-liners. These are put this in your pipe and smoke it levels of bad. What the fuck? I love this. It kind of feels like Grayson is the protagonist of an 80s action movie. Moving on, the way the cutscenes are made is great. I love how the black and white photos look realistic and the CGI looks great. Although it kind of reminds me of the CGI from late 90s horror games, but that's not really a bad thing now, is it? The backstory is also amazing, and probably the best thing about the story. It's given to you in these intel folders, but what makes it stand out from others that do the same is the way that it is written, which is in the majority in the first person, which makes it a lot more personal. We really get to know what Grayson is thinking at the majority of times. They also ask questions on things that would later be answered in Resistance 2, which ties the two games together with a neat little bow. There's something else about these folders, but we'll put a pin on that. But what about the gameplay? How did they manage to make a shooter work on the PSP? Well, before we get into any of that, a quick disclaimer. I am emulating this, so that's why the graphics are all fucky-wucky. I'm sorry about that. And the fucky-wucky thing too. But to make this work, the developers had to use a trick that they had already used for the Siphon Filter games. And that is turning the circle, triangle, square, and X buttons into a second analog stick. And it works. Obviously it isn't flawless. Matter of fact, I would probably compare it to a game with tank controls, but only a little bit better. It is slow, and in the tenser times it can be a hindrance. To make the shooting actually work, the developers had to add something else. Auto aim. And it is annoying. Look, just because it is the only solution doesn't really mean it's a good one. From a longer range it doesn't really work too well, but up close it does. Sort of. In its defense though, there is also normal aim mode that is better at ranged combat. But when the auto aim fails is when there are multiple enemies on the screen, which happens often. Imagine this, you want to kill a particular enemy. You will obviously center your screen on it, but the little aim thing will just aim at another one, and sometimes those motherfuckers are behind walls. Granted, this doesn't happen all the time, and sometimes it's nearly harmless, but it's just annoying. However, to go along with the rest of the shooting, you also have automatic cover. It's a bit annoying at times, but it does work. Enemies kill you really fast in this game, so having cover is essential. It might sound like I'm shitting on this, but I do enjoy this approach. I think it will feel sketchy independent of the method used to port a third-person shooter to the PSP. I also feel like there was no way to really win, but the game did a fantastic job with what it had. Okay, we're already acquainted with the controls, now it's time for the boomstick. Throughout the game, you'll be using mainly two workhorse weapons, the .303 Storm Rifle and the BM001. The .303 is your standard machine gun. It's reliable, there's tons of ammo for it, but it doesn't do too much damage. To compensate for this, however, the all fires a grenade launcher and it fucks. The BM001 is a laser gun that is also very reliable, but works best at close range. The all-fire in this weapon is also great. It charges a round that will bounce around and kills multiple enemies. Great for crowd control. But these aren't your only guns. You also have grenades, a sniper rifle, an RPG, a shotgun, a chain gun, and finally a wall hack gun. The grenades are pretty self-explanatory, old reliable basically. The sniper rifle is also pretty simple, with a pretty simple all-fire that slows down time. The RPG is really useful for the big boys, but it has a weird all-fire that basically stops the rocket mid-flight, and that allows you to select another target. Sort of like in the Looney Tunes, it's very useful and basically a necessity for certain boss fights. Now, the shotgun is fine for close combat. Really close combat. Basically, it's only effective against the smaller guys or if you're smelling Chimeran farts. Its all-fire is also pretty generic. It's basically the all-fire from the Half-Life 2 shotgun, nothing you haven't seen before. The chain gun is amazing, firing really fast, but you do have to wind it up before shooting. Its secondary fire though might be one of the most useful, making a shield around you that you can carry, making you a bit slower in the process. Finally, we have the weird one, the Auger WS, or simply known as the wall hack gun. The Auger allows you to see and shoot enemies through walls, while also dealing a fair amount of damage. But man, does it not hit the broadside of a barn. Its all-fire makes another wall, but this time it's stationary and you also can't shoot through it with regular bullets, so it's kind of meh. Now, the guns themselves feel good. There aren't any weapons that are useless or that are too situational, and that's great. Even the shotgun that I kinda shat on is pretty good. However, the enemies are a bit bullet spongy, taking at times a full magazine to shoot down. This is just annoying. It's like part of the difficulty stems from the fact that these guys eat up bullets like it's nobody's business. I don't like it, but it does lead us to... In this game, all the enemies look terrifying, from the big boys all the way to the grunts. But most importantly is that also do the new ones. The old enemies that you see in the Resistance games, like the hybrids, the steelheads, or the leapers, have been ported really well into the PSP, keeping that look, feel, and ferociousness that the fans have grown accustomed to. But yeah, there are also some new enemies that are exclusive to Retribution, like the boilers that are suicide bombers, the hags that are the evolution of the boilers but don't commit suicide. There's also the big fuck off brutes with the chain guns, the siren that is the obligatory water monster. Thankfully though, it's used like 5 times. Then there's the small and big drones that try to kamikaze you when their health is low.
Oh, they got this shit myself.
And lastly, there are these mechs that are like mini bosses. You also get to ride these things twice in probably the coolest levels in the game. I really like these new enemies. They don't feel off from the rest of the Chimera. The only real problem that I have with the enemies in general is that, again, they can feel a bit bullet spongy. I guess that's a thing from the Resistance franchise, but that does take away a bit of the fun from the game, at least for me. I do understand why this happens though. The Chimera that we see in this game are supposed to be these strong alien-human hybrids that are the perfect weapon. Human guns do little to stop them. But not all enemies are like this. Both the hags and the boilers can be killed with a single shot to their big ass foreheads. Kinda takes the scare away from the hags when you realize it, but it's still super satisfying. Let's go over that pin we made a while back about the intel. I might have already said it, but the writing stands out because it was done mostly in the first person. I personally prefer Grayson giving me insights on what is going on in his head, rather than a report that has way too many words about something that the player might not even care about. Hell, if this even gives us the reaction of certain characters to some things that happen that we would never find out otherwise. But as I said back then, there is something else to these intel folders. And the thing is that they are divided into 3 categories that talk about different subjects. There's the secrets of the Maquis that talks about the shady things that go on in Maquis resistance. Then there's Cloven lore that talks about this third mysterious species called the Cloven that aren't human but aren't Chimera either. And lastly, there's Retribution, which is a bit more broad but usually talks about Grayson's revenge plans and overall thoughts. It's usually a bit more personal than the rest, but that's why I like it so much. The coolest thing though is that if you find all the folders from a specific category, you'll get a special weapon. And if you find all the intel, you'll get the Magnum from Resistance 2. I really like this. It gives you an incentive to find as much intel as you can, so you can test out all these cool looking guns. These different intel types aren't level specific. As you go through the levels, you'll find that they are all mixed and hidden in secret areas or just outside of your view. And these areas are at times super well done. Not just because of the process of getting there, which is pretty cool at times, but also the oppressive atmosphere that they produce. I wouldn't call Retribution a horror game, but it does have some spooky moments, and I love that. Take for instance the Cloven hideouts that are full of their precious artifacts from when they were human, or the lifeless body of a world-renowned German singer who Grayson saw perform mere months before the Chimera attacked England. These things set up a gloomy but not edgy world. These situations are all somewhat believable, and it contributes to an amazing storyline. This is the real reason why I love the story of Retribution. You wanna know something crazy? This game and Resistance 2 have a secret in common. Now, if you have both Resistance 2 and Retribution, you can connect to your PS3 and play a version of this game called Infected. This changes the game completely. Grayson, out of the blue, is now enlisted into this American Special Forces organization called SERPA and becomes infected, having regen health, a new outfit, and glowing eyes. Some pieces of dialogue will change to accompany this fact, but the overall story stays mostly the same. The only exception being the new intel folders that add more backstory, which is a pretty cool thing to add. Sadly though, I don't think that you can play this game on the PPSSPP emulator, hence why I'm stealing this footage. All the creators will be in the description. I'm sorry for, you know, stealing your stuff. But including this mode, even though it was completely optional and not needed to make this game as great as it is, shows just how committed the devs were to an IP that was not even theirs. But man, if only there was a way to play this game in the current year of
2024
on my PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5. I guess we'll never get that in our lifetime. Woe is us, I guess. When this game came out, it did not get ported into any other consoles, like what happened to Ratchet and Clank Size Matters, or God of War Chains of Olympus, and Ghost of Sparta. This game was left to die on Sony's most successful failure. That was still 15 fucking years later. Yeah, I was just pulling your leg earlier. This game's been ported not only for the PS4, but also the PS5 in plain 2024. What I find stranger is that this is not an exclusive to that overpriced PS Plus premium bullshit. Look, don't argue with me, it's 152 euro bucks. It is overpriced. I mean, the game is still there, but it is the only Resistance game that you can actually buy with actual money. At least for now, anyways. This seems to be a move on Sony's part to preserve certain classics from older consoles. This happened to Resistance, but also the games like Secret Agent Clank and Dino Crisis. Games that you can see have tons of similarities. But in any case, I'm glad they did so. Now, this doesn't mean that they're testing out the waters for Resistance 4, don't get your tinfoil hats in a twist, but it is still giving a dying fanbase something to chew on, and that's better than nothing. Some fanbases would kill for a situation like this. Resistance Retribution is a great game. I don't think that can be understated. Not just because of what it does well in the vacuum with the hardware it's on, but also because of what it does well in general. It finds a way to deliver on everything you'd expect a shooter to have, and very competently at that. The solutions that this game poses to inherent problems of making a shooter on the PSP are well made, even if those same solutions create more problems in its wake. But Resistance as a franchise has been dead for 13 years, and I don't think we'll ever get another one. So it's good to see in plain 2024 that it hasn't been completely forgotten. I commend whoever had the idea of porting the game to the PS4 and PS5. It's giving a convenient way of playing the game for people that might want to enjoy it. So with that, my final verdict is an 8 out of 10. If you have this game at home, dust off your PSP and play it. I don't think you'll regret it. But yeah, that's it. See ya.
I promise you I'll always be right here. I'm right next to you.